20 years ago, Troika Studios was formed by Tim Cain, Leonard Boyarsky, and Jason D. Anderson under interesting circumstances. These three individuals helped create Fallout back when they were working at Interplay Studios, especially Tim Cain. He is the major reason why Fallout was made. They worked hard, often spending hours after work working on it, unpaid. It was a new IP, and at first Interplay wasn't behind the project. Thankfully, they didn't cancel it and Fallout was made. It became a critical success and enough of a commercial success for the company to get behind this new IP. But that's a double-edged sword. It's great because you have more resources to work with your product and it's going to get promoted. But the bad side is the interference from the higher-ups at your company. They want their input to matter, they want to control the marketing, ideas, and they want to get involved in the development process. You sacrifice a certain amount of creative freedom and ambition for this project. This is why Troika Studios happened. Tim Cain was dissatisfied with the development of Fallout 2 and the higher-ups getting involved. Obviously, the other two co-founders felt the same way, and they started a studio so they can be their own bosses. No metaphorical chains holding them back. They can work on the projects they want and no limit to their creativity. I'm not going to go in depth about the games or go in depth about their fall in this video. I already did that in my Tim Cain documentary through the perspective of Tim Cain himself. Link will be in the description. Sit back and enjoy, because I've really thought about this part of Troika's creation for a while and I'm finally able to put it into words. Now, when you have a good job, and let's say you get a promotion or things are going very well, most likely you're going to stick with it. If you have job security, that usually encourages you to stay there. And we all know the famous saying, in order to succeed you have to take some risk in life. Well, it's easier said than done, especially when your livelihood is at stake and you have to pay bills. In early 1998, Tim Cain, Leonard Boyarsky, and Jason D. Anderson took that risk. Think about it. They weren't fired. Interplay didn't shut down in 1998. They left on their own right after Fallout became a success. The start of a franchise, and especially for Tim Cain, it had to be hard to leave it behind. Tim Cain described how he felt in an RPG Codex interview. And I quote, "I left when I felt like I had lost control of Fallout. So many people took over after Fallout 1 when they changed their minds about the IP and suddenly it became a AAA game. Before Fallout 1 shipped, we have been overshadowed by D&D and Star Trek, so we were left alone to develop it our way. After it shipped, people were suddenly dictating content, box art, advertisement assets, and everything else, so I walked away from it. I was so proud of the game and happy that people were so passionate about it, but I realized it wasn't mine anymore and never would be. This was a choice due to creative differences, and we all know the deal with taking risk. If it works out, you're the smartest person out there. What a wonderful choice, you beautiful, wonderful individual. And somehow, you've gotten more handsome or more beautiful. Just what a lovely individual you are, you beautiful bastard. But on the other hand, if you fail, you're the dumbest motherfucker out there. How could you? What are you thinking, you fucking idiot? And you spend nights looking at your mirror wondering how'd your life got that way and what the fuck just happened. That's just the way risks are, and we all know it because we've all took some risk in our life. Troika Games was created out of a need for the founders to express their creativity and to make original games. I believe this is shown most in their first release, Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. I've said a lot about this game, no need for me to spend the next 20 minutes gushing about it, but to talk about Troika's legacy, we have to talk about their projects. Arcanum is truly a unique game that holds a dear place in my gaming memories. A world where magic met an industrial revolution. Spells would go toe-to-toe with technology. Fireballs and bullets, summons and blunderbuss, swords and rifles, flamethrowers and armor. A world where you discover the impacts that this industrial revolution had on society, how the magic users view it, how the different religions see it, what members of society embrace it, and what members hate it. Arcanum is what Tim Cain describes as a kitchen sink project, something that Troika threw everything into, a mix of creative, original ideas. Some worked and some didn't, but what Arcanum did best to me is choices. The different choices you see in character creation, the difference in playing a dwarf gunslinger or a magic elf, the different schematics you learn, spells, traps, characters, backgrounds, etc. You have a lot to work with. Trust me, Che the dwarf had a different experience from Nihilus the magic elf. My first playthrough with Trey was quite an experience. I remember running around like a maniac trying to buy bullets, or make them, wearing plate armor while shooting an elephant gun. He definitely had a harder beginning than Nihilus, but it was worth it because I wanted that damn flamethrower and Tesla rod. Nihilus, on the other hand, was much easier to play since I already knew the game, and it's much easier using magic, especially in the beginning, than having a gunslinger. But I'll always remember Che, the dwarf gunslinger, especially my party. That damn dog that ended up being a great tank. Gar, the quote-unquote ugly human who was on display in the city of Tehran. And of course, your first follower, Virgil, and others too. Arcanum was a flawed game. It was buggy on release, which hurt its reputation. I think the hybrid combat system was a mistake, and they should have just focused on making the turn-based combat as great as possible. And some other things too, like some of the dungeons and some other stuff, but I already reviewed the game. Arcanum is the best example of what Troika was all about, of what the founders left a solid position in Interplay for, what Tim Cain left his baby aka Fallout for. They wanted to control their projects and not be held down by higher-ups and publishers. Now, I'm not blind to Troika's mistakes. No developer is perfect. This video is not to hold Troika up on a pedestal like some god. I've reviewed Arcanum and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and I said what I liked and disliked about both games, and already covered their downfall in depth in my video about Tim Cain. This video is a tribute, whatever you want to call it, to a developer, a group of people who took a risk and experienced the benefits and consequence of those risks. After Arcanum, they didn't have the freedom they had before. Arcanum didn't sell a lot, and the buggy release didn't help either. Atari did interfere in their next release, Dungeons & Dragons, the Temple of Elemental Evil. They had a short time to work on it and had to add things they didn't want to please Atari. And they had to change the D&D rule set far into development. This resulted in a game that was praised for its combat system, and some call it the best representation of D&D combat in video game form. Unfortunately, the game was released with many bugs, and my guess is due to all the changes during development and the already short development time. They didn't get to add much to the story and lacked in content. Troika's last game would be a game that had troubled development and didn't get the respect it deserved until after release, and even then, still till this day, I think it deserves way more respect. That game is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I spent many hours with Arcanum and Bloodlines. What else is there to say that I hadn't said before in past videos? I love the storytelling and atmosphere, the engrossing setting of the underworld of Los Angeles, where vampire clans roam around with different factions, politics, and philosophies, and humankind are oblivious to this fact, and they try to keep it a secret. Not to mention the soundtrack is literally like crack. It's so fucking addicting. You want to talk about gameplay choices and replayability? Play the game as a Tremere, then play as a Nosferatu, then tell me your experiences. And you want to talk about quests? Go inside the mansion haunted by a poltergeist, or better yet, wait until you receive the untitled videotape. I'm not going to spoil it, but for those that played it, you know what I'm talking about. That experience legit creeped me the fuck out. But enough gushing. Like Troika's other releases, Bloodlines was plagued by bugs and unfortunately had the bad luck of being released at the same time as Half-Life 2, and I believe they used the same engine too. Half-Life 2 would go on to receive many accolades, while Bloodlines would have to wait a bit to get the credit it deserves. As I said before, this is not a video to make excuses for the flaws of these games, but to celebrate Troika Games. I would rather play a buggy, ambitious original game than play a stale game with very little bugs. The founders of Troika admitted to their flaws. In an interview with Tim Cain, he admitted that the games were buggy, and gamers had the right to criticize them for being flawed. But he also felt that they had a bad rep for blaming Activision for their troubled development of Bloodlines, and assuming none of the responsibility themselves. Unfortunately, Troika shut down in 2004. This risk that started in 1998 ended 6 years later. Now, this had to be a specific kind of disappointment for the followers. They weren't just employees, they founded the company. They were responsible for people being employed. Sure, the three founders would have no problem finding work, but what about the people that worked there? The people that helped them create their visions? Their names that we don't remember? This had to weigh heavy on their hearts. When studios shut down, people lose their jobs and have to find work. And sometimes that's not an easy task. I do hope the employees of Troika found good paying jobs after it shut down. At the end, all was left was the three guys that left Interplay together to chase their dreams and put their visions into video game form. They weren't businessmen, and in retrospect that did hurt them. Their games didn't sell very well, and since this is a business, it didn't help them either, but at the end of the day, they took a risk and chased their dreams, and in the process they came out with 3 games that dedicated fans still talk about, mod, and celebrate today. Arcanum and Bloodlines are 2 of my favorite games of all time. I still have to finish Temple of Elemental Evil. These games weren't perfect, and they definitely could have worked on some things. Maybe testing so their games weren't as buggy as they came out to be. Maybe they could have hired someone that was good with finances so they could stay afloat. Maybe they could have used another engine or did something to make Bloodlines development an easier process. In retrospect, we can point out dozens of things they could have worked on, and they're certainly valid. They weren't perfect, and their games were flawed for sure. But no game is perfect. Every game has their issues. And with all that being said, I think Troika was a success. Thank you for watching. If you want to leave a comment, let me know what you think. Have a great day.